In the words of Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. The time of mourning is a complicated time filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. We begin our service with the recitation of psalms and prayers, thus linking Marilyn's life with the 3,000-year-old tradition of the people Israel and the eternity of God. Psalm 15, Mizmor LaDavid, Adonai mi yagur ba'ohalecha mi yishkon bahar kodshecha, holech tamim ufoel tzedek v'dover emet bilvavo, lo ragal al leshono lo asa l're'ehu ra'a v'cherpa lo nasa al krovo. Nivzeh be'enav nim'as v'et yirei Adonai yechabed, nishba lahara v'lo yamir. Kaspo lo natan b'neshech v'shochad al naki lo lakach, ose ele lo yimot le'olam. Do we deserve to enter God's sanctuary? Can we merit a place in the presence of God? Live with integrity, do what is right, speak the truth without deceit, have no slander upon your tongue, do no evil to others, do not mistreat your neighbor. Spurn a contemptible person, but honor those who revere the Lord. Never retract a promise once made, though it may bring you harm. Lend no money at unfair rates, accept no bribe against the innocent. Make these deeds your own, then shall you stand firm forever. From Psalm 103, Kerachem av al banim richam Adonai al yareyav, ki hu yada yitzreinu zachur ki afar anachnu. Enosh kechatzir yamav ketzitz hasadeh ken yatzitz, ki ruach avrabo ve'enenu velo yakirenu od mekomo. V'chesed Adonai me'olam v'yad olam al yareyav v'tzitkato livnei vanim. As a parent has compassion for their children, God has compassion for those who show reverence. God knows how we are fashioned. God remembers that we are dust. The days of mortals are like grass. We flourish as the flowers of the field. A wind passes over them, and they are no more, and no one can recognize where they grew. But God's compassion is everlasting. God's kindness to children's children, to all the reverent ones, endures age after age, unchanging. And from the last chapter of the book of Proverbs, Eshet Chayil, a little bit from that. Eshet Chayil mi'imtza v'rachok mipnini michra, batach balev bala v'shala lo yechsar, gemalatu tovalovra kol yemei chayeha. Kapa parsala ani v'yadeha shilcha le'evyon, oz v'hadar levusha v'tischak le'yom acharon. Piha patcha v'chochma v'torat chesed ala shona, Sophia halichot beita v'lechem atzlut lo tochel. Kamu vaneha v'yashruha bala v'yahalala. Rabot banot asuchayol v'at alit al kulana. Sheker hachein v'hevel hayofi. Isha yirat Adonai hiti talal. Tenula mi priyadeha v'halaluha b'sha'arim ma'aseha. What a precious find is an Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor. Her worth is far beyond rubies. Her husband puts his confidence in her and lacks no good thing. She is good to him, never bad, all the days of her life. She opens her hand to the needy and extends her hand to the poor. She is clothed with strength and splendor. She looks to the future cheerfully. She opens her mouth with wisdom. Her tongue is guided by kindness. She oversees the activities of her household and never eats the bread of idleness. Her children come forward and bless her. Her husband praises her and says, "Many women have done superbly, but you surpass them all." Charm is deceitful and beauty vain, but a God-revering woman is much to be praised. Extol her for the fruit of her hand wherever people gather. Her deeds speak her praise. We're gathered here to remember Marilyn and to speak her praises as well, and several members of the family will share words of eulogy with us. And we'll begin with her daughter, Sharon.
When your mom lives to be 90 years old, there are many times you find yourself reflecting on what you might say when she dies. Don't get me wrong, telling her how much she meant to me and how important she was in my life was said directly to her, and her to me. Often over the years, and especially the past few years and days. However, even when I knew the end was nearing, and she spent her final weeks living in my home, I still couldn't formulate the words I wanted to say for her eulogy, because how could my mom ever be gone? It was and still is a difficult concept to fathom. My mom has always been the one and only constant in my life. She has been with me through every life stage, marriage, divorce, second marriage, to Stephen, and she made that happen too. Our joys, cutting the umbilical cord when Eliza was born, Carly and Eliza's theater and dance productions, Jake's soccer games, and all the major holidays we spent together. She was my strength and my support during times of uncertainty, and of course, we weathered sorrows together with the loss of my dad, Chuck, my brother, Bob, my grandmother, Helen, and later her best friend and sister, Florence, and brother-in-law, David, who she often traveled the world with. I always thought I was strong and resilient by nature. Now I realize it was because she served as my foundation that allowed me to rise. And now she is actually gone. It feels surreal. Marilyn Greenfield Green Kessler, mom to me, Jeff and Risa, grandmother to 9 and great-grandmother to 19 grandkids, died at 2 a.m. with me sitting by her bedside, holding her hand, stroking her hair as she took her last breath. It was so sad and so beautiful to share those final moments with her. But it was not at all scary, because my mom always believed in fate, and she taught her kids to do the same. When our time was meant to be, it will be, she would say. She was not afraid to take chances. We joked that when I was the one who was assigned to be her designated hospice caregiver, it was the biggest risk of her life. She was not afraid to try new adventures. Live until you die was her theme. Most of you have heard the tales of travel, visiting all 7 continents and traveling by land, air, and sea, as well as by horse, camel, donkey, elephant, dolphin, and I think ostrich. She told me last year that she had done everything on her extensive bucket list. How many people can say that at the end of their lives? She was also not afraid to speak up if she felt she was wronged. Her principles were intact. One classic Marilyn example was in 1961, when I was 1 year old. Our family moved to our Bowie home. It was a newly built planned Levitt community, ideal for suburban living. A dream come true for my mom and dad, who grew up in cramped 1-bedroom apartments in Brooklyn, New York. However, as she tells the story, the builder was not responding to her consistent request to complete the final repairs on her and her neighbors' homes. Not one to be ignored, she went alone to the model homes where the management offices were on a main street, and with me in my stroller and her with a picket sign, she walked back and forth with her complaints, attracting the local news, who later wrote a story about it. Needless to say, they finished the work up quickly after that. Fast forward to this past month, when I was cleaning up and found an invoice from Leisure World Management on her counter. In large letters and lots of exclamation points, she wrote a note to them that she will not pay that bill until all the work was properly completed. People listened when she spoke. Marilyn was authentic before authenticity was in style. She lived her values. Judaism being her most important, she learned to read Torah and had a bat mitzvah at around 70. She was practical, not materialistic. In her current apartment, she still has the same dining room set when she got married to my dad in the 1950s, and the same living room chairs and yellow vinyl couch from the 1970s. I still like them, she'd say. Why get something else? And she was positive. The glass was not just half full, it was completely full. She was never one to complain. If anyone asked her how she was, she would always say, "She's fine." Even her last days, when she felt lousy, the first words out of her mouth were how lucky she was in life and how grateful she was for everything and everyone. Of course, with some nudging, I got her to admit that it was me that she was most grateful for. A contrived moment of satisfaction for me to offset being reminded most of my life that I was the most difficult of her 4 kids growing up. And she always looked forward. Even before she was sick, she would tell me that the next time when she comes back into this world, she wants to come back as a bird. This week, I asked her what kind of bird she wants to come back as, and she said, a bluebird of happiness. So, Mom, it's time to fly. Enjoy your new travel adventures with the same courage, smarts, curiosity, kindness, generosity, and love that you shared with us. Stay fearless. Des Vidania. Until next time, I love you. We love you.
And her son-in-law, Stephen.
So I went to see my doctor the other day. He gave me 6 months to live. I told him I couldn't pay. He gave me another 6 months. This is the last joke I told Marilyn, and she loved it. She even remarked that maybe she should tell her doctor the same. Mom loved a good laugh, and I enjoyed giving her as many as I could. An accomplished games player, hand and foot, dominoes, Scrabble were particular favorites. Mom could be ruthless once the competition started. She played to win and showed no mercy. Once, while playing a very competitive Scrabble board, she put down a word that I could never consider using with my kids around. When questioned about this, her answer was very simple. I had to. It was a triple word score. About a week ago, we played our last game of dominoes as a family. Mom was fully aware of her illness and the very limited time she had left. She destroyed all of us in the game. I will cherish those last games with her. I have much to thank Mom for. As you know, both she and my mother conspired to get Sharon and I together. I know everyone knows this story. What you don't know, and what I didn't even know until about 10 years into my marriage, was the amazing favor that Mom did for me. She and Sharon spoke almost daily, and one day after a long call, as Sharon was saying goodbye to her mom, her mother said, "By the way, I spoke with Yvonne Weinreb the other day. I told her you would go out on a date with him." I believe Sharon's response, I told her you would go on a date with Stephen. I believe Sharon's response to her was, "Mom, isn't he short?" I can honestly say I have never met another person as kind, selfless, and giving as Marilyn. Always volunteering to teach English to immigrants, working at the equipment desk at Leisure World, and generously donating to worthy causes. It is not hard to see where Sharon gets her values from. Over the past few days, I've been trying to visualize what our lives will look like without Marilyn's physical presence, and I can tell you there are no scenarios where we are better off. But I can honestly say that I am better off having had her as a mother-in-law. I love you and will miss you. Mom.
Her daughter, Risa.
I decided that there's a likelihood that I'd be too emotional to be able to speak myself. And so since Zev has been writing letters for me for as long as we've been together almost, whether or not they be birthday cards or wedding cards or whatever it is. So I asked him to write it, and I will hopefully have the energy and the words to be able to add just a line or two. So from Zev in Israel, just a few thoughts on my mother-in-law's life, and not because that's all I've got. Far from it. Marilyn, Mom, deserves a whole biography, which I might title The Schwieger of a Lifetime. And for those of you who don't know, a Schwieger is the Yiddish word for mother-in-law, and it tends to be a bit on the negative side. And she truly was that. Being that exception that proves every rule. After nearly half a century, I can truthfully say that I loved her like a second mother, but without all the painful and annoying baggage. I saw in her a fiercely independent but quietly determined soul who knew what she wanted out of life: discovery, experience, knowledge, authenticity, integrity. Though she wasn't, in my opinion, a very religious person, she was deeply aware of her responsibility to maintain the chain of Jewish peoplehood, and felt a degree of what many who knew her well considered spirituality. But I'm not sure. But certainly, she was not closed to spiritual ideas. Mostly, though, I think she valued decency and honesty above all else. And in that, she was like my late father. May his memory be everlasting, and like I aspire to be, she'll always be with me. And my addition is that, as Sharon has said, and how everybody says how strong she was and supportive she was, my one example, I think, sort of fits the bill. I was 9 years old, and we had just come back from a long weekend to Hershey, Pennsylvania, where I had been using bathrooms everywhere we could. And when we got home, my parents had decided that obviously I needed to be taken to the doctor. When my Sharon and Bob Zecher Levracha and I and a couple friends in the neighborhood were all outside and getting ready to get into the car because Mom was driving us to the movie theater. Jeff was too young. We were like waiting, what's wrong with her? She's on the phone, she's on the phone. That's not our mom, you know? And finally, she got off the phone without, serious, but not upset, not with tears in her eyes. And she said, Risa, come with me. A neighbor on the street was taking everybody to the movie. She said, you're coming with me to the hospital. She said, you have diabetes, we think, and we have to check. So for 5 days, I was in the hospital where she came every day, got home in the evening to be with the other 3 kids, and my father would come and leave. It was only many, many years later when I had a conversation with my diabetologist who told me that the reason I'm likely to be living at 64 years old since the age of 9 with diabetes and no complications, Leonora, is because for the first 2 years that I had diabetes, it was kept in control. So I have nothing more to thank her for beyond everything she gave me in my life. the belief that I could do and fix anything, even health, or at least live with it and move on. And it was only years after that day that I found out that she wasn't even sure how she made it home from the hospital that evening. It was in the days before as many highways as we have in the Washington area. And the hospital I was at, for those of you who know, was Holy Cross, and we were in Bowie. So it was not an easy trip, and she was driving through the tears and through rain, and she got to the public library, and they had just closed their doors, and she banged on the windows and said, "Please, please open up." She took home a pile of books on diabetes that big, put it on her nightstand, and read them every night. Anyway, Mom, you'll always be loved. Your memory is memories and memories and memories by people who didn't even know you, and people who have known you through others like Sharon and Jeff and I and our children, and now our grandchildren, your great-grandchildren.
Some of the grandchildren will be speaking. We first want to call together Jake, Eliza, and Carly.
Our grandma was a woman of many talents. She was adventurous, she was generous, she was persistent, and as anyone who has played her in a round of dominoes or hand and foot would tell you, she was fiercely competitive. And she wasn't shy about her many, many, many wins. So in her honor, we'd like to share some of Grandma Marilyn's top trophies. Number 5, the most well-traveled award. Not many people can say they've been to every continent, but Grandma proudly checked each of the 7 off her bucket list. Riding an elephant in Thailand, hanging with penguins in Antarctica, going on a safari in South Africa, walking the Great Wall of China, just listening to Grandma talk about her global explorations was always a fun trip in and of itself. She traveled so much so that when we bought her a book of 1,001 places to visit before you die, she had already been to all but one. The last one wasn't exciting enough for her to even check out. In fact, her twice-yearly trips to Israel felt more like your standard commute. 4, the most persistent matchmaker award. Grandma's biggest badge of honor was her ever-expanding mishpacha. Any chance she got, she'd be sure to one-up the ladies of Leisure World with news of yet another great-grandkid entering the world. For those of us, however, who weren't already providing new material for her Creekside community newsletter, Grandma made it her personal mission to speed up the process. For me, as the sole wine reb grandchild without marriage and clear sight, that meant near daily reminders that she knows of a nice Jewish boy who she thinks I really should meet. Going so far as to triple confirm the dates of my arrival and invite them over, just by coincidence, to set her plans in motion. Well, Grandma, in this case, you may not have made a successful shidduch, but you're certainly the first person I'll think of when I am ready to tie the knot.
Number 3, the most decorated champion award. So for those of you that don't know, my grandma competed in the Senior Olympics in shuffleboard and ping pong, other games. She absolutely cleaned up. She won so many medals, they became giveaways at my bar mitzvah, literally. Now, to be fair, in the 80-plus female ping pong category in the Maryland Senior Olympics, there were years when she was the only competitor. But that didn't seem to detract from the joy of winning for her. She even sought out those competitions to add more medals to her count. It wasn't just the Senior Olympics, though. She was this hungry to win in all games: dominoes, hand and foot, anything. In her final weeks, she was holding her stomach in pain while playing dominoes. We were moving the tiles around the board for her. She still managed to beat us all after reminding us how embarrassed we should be to lose to her in this state. Afterwards, when I said to her, "Hey, at least you're still beating us all in dominoes," she replied, "Yeah, and any other game you want to play." Number 2, the most adventurous award. So one of my favorite fun facts when I do icebreakers and such is that I went skydiving with my grandma for her 80th birthday. I can promise you several people in this room were less than thrilled with an 80-year-old jumping out of a plane. But nobody could stop her sheer will to live life to the fullest. About 5 years later, she decided she wanted to try weed for the first time. In her words, she was just curious and always wanted to try everything once. At that point, weed had become semi-legal in DC, so my siblings and I took her to a shop to buy some. Because of the dubious legality, you had to purchase an intentionally overpriced item from the shop, and they'd give you weed as a free gift with purchase. So we walk in, and I ask Grandma to go pick out a t-shirt to buy. She walks over to the rack, looks at the price tag, and says, "Not for $40, I'm not buying a t-shirt." The employees are loving her, of course, and I politely asked her to just pick a shirt and not worry about the price. Months after we took the edibles together, there was a medical marijuana speech given at Leisure World, which she proudly attended wearing none other than her $40 King Weedy t-shirt.
Finally, number 1, the Greatest Grandma Award. Grandma had a lot to brag about. Chief among them was her large and loving family of 9 grandkids and 19 great-grandkids. Every hangout was an adventure. There was ping pong, board games, pool days, trips to DC, and our favorite bedtime story, I Should Have Stayed in Bed. We laughed as she acted out each character's voice and begged her to say our favorite lines over and over. It was contagious to be in her orbit and feel her joy in being a grandma. We checked her refrigerator for pictures each visit, counting how many we showed up in, celebrating our win as grandkids when our image count was high, and teasing her about favoritism if it was low. Turning the tables on us, she'd say if we wanted better fridge coverage, then we'd have to send more pictures. It feels fitting then to award Grandma one final win, her Lifetime Achievement Award. For teaching us to go all in, to be generous with time, money, and love, and most importantly, to explore everything that life has to offer. We love you, Grandma.
And finally, her granddaughter, Eliana.
So it's hard to speak last. You have all the emotion. But Granny, just saying that brings me happiness, joy, love, and so many good memories. The love I felt all the time during visits, and mostly all the way from the other side of the world, was a strong love that will be with me forever. When I was spending my year in Los Angeles while keeping this distant relationship with Naftali, I was asked so much and so often how this relationship is lasting. And my answer is and was that I learned it from you and your close relationship with us. Although the hugs and kisses had to cross oceans, but they were felt just as strong as if they were right there. I'll share just one small story. When I was visiting you and Grandpa alone when I was 11, I went to services at your shul on Friday night. During services, the sky opened up and it started pouring rain and with lots of lightning and thunder. The way back, Grandpa drove home, but you knew I had to walk, and that is what we did, walked back in this pouring rain. Grandpa kept stopping next to us, making sure we don't want to join him, but we just kept walking. We got home drenched, wet to the bones, and laughing hysterically. Just wanted to thank you for understanding and being there for me and with me. That was only one time of many. Being back at your house now also made me realize that the last time I was there was 16 years ago on the trip with Naftali. Like today, it was Friday, and Naftali proposed at your house. And since it was Shabbat in Israel, you guys were the first and only to know at that moment and share the simcha with us for a couple of hours. We love you so, so much. Looking through your house, I found a beautiful gift Uncle Jeff once gave you, and the words on it express perfectly what Sipporah, Avigal, and I, and our spouses and children feel about you. That woman is a success who loves life and lives it to the fullest, who has discovered and shared the strengths and talents that are uniquely her own, who puts her best into each task and leaves each situation better than she found it, who seeks and finds that which is beautiful in all people, and all things, whose heart is full of love and warm with compassion, who has found joy in living and peace within herself. By Barbara Burrow. Watch over us and know we love you so much. Like I said, we're used to distant relationships, so this relationship will continue to last forever. Love you.
So finally, let's have Jeff and George come up together.
I met Marilyn in Bowie. She was there, and I was sitting alone because my wife, I think, had passed. And I sat over there, and I kept seeing her on the right side of the synagogue. And it says, I've got to talk to that lady, that woman about it. And so I went over to her, and that's how it started. She was willing to go out with me, and we went to a few places, and we got married just like that. But we've had a good time, you know, with all the places we've been. We even went to Antarctica, where we was in the ship, and it took us into Antarctica where the people were working and all that. And right in front of us and all around us was penguins. Nothing but penguins. And then we saw these Japanese women and men. They were taking their clothes off. He said, why are they taking their clothes off? They were going into the ocean, and it was cold. I don't know how they did it, but we had all the penguins all around us, and Marilyn loved them. And from then on, we did a lot of traveling, and it was wonderful with her. She's a wonderful woman, and I'm glad I met her at Bowie first. Well, I was on the left side of the synagogue, and I kept seeing her all the time, seeing her. And my wife had died, my previous wife had died, and I said, I'm going to go over there and talk to her. And that's how our life started. But that's about. But she was a wonderful woman. And I'll miss her. Thank you.
So I express myself in the written word less than with the verbally, but I think I'd regret it if I didn't share a couple brief, just two little incidents that speak to Mom. Mom was practical to a fault, which she passed on to us, but she had a very deep sense of emotions and spirituality. Just two very quick incidents. I was sitting at home, 1988, sitting at home with Mom. We were living on our own together, and the phone rings, and I hear that it's Zev on the other side, on the other line, and she's very excited. He's very excited. They'd just given birth to their first daughter, Eliana, and it was her first grandchild, so she was very excited. And at the end of the call, she hangs up, and I look at her and say, so I guess I'm now irrelevant? And she goes, yeah. So, but I have a great relationship with Eliana ever since then, ever since she replaced me. And the other incident I just recall, around the same time, Mom was off in the Arctic, hella hiking on glaciers, because that's what you do. And I'm home alone, and the phone rings. And I hear, Jeff, it's Mom. I say, not supposed to be calling. You're in the middle of the Arctic. She says, yeah, I'm in traction in a field hospital because a woman who I was helping down a glacier slipped and I chipped a vertebrae. I said, are you in pain right now? She goes, no, not really. I've got the morphine, I said, so we can joke about this? She goes, yeah, I guess so. And that speaks to the nature of Mom. We could always take any situation with a smile, with a laugh, and she will be sorely missed.
We'll have an opportunity to share many more memories and stories at Shiva the next couple of days. We extend our condolences today to George, her husband of 33 years, to her children, Risa and Zev, Sharon and Stephen, Jeffrey and Miriam, to her stepchildren, Susan, Lisa, and Michelle and Chris, to all her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. For many of us today, Marilyn's passing has come as a shock because we saw Marilyn in shul here for Yizkor on Shavuot, and though she looked frail, we had no idea that she was so sick. She was always a vital woman, as we've heard from everyone, and of course she will be missed by all. I first got to know Marilyn and George when they started coming to our services in Olney before we even had a building. Marilyn was a member of Neve Shalom in Bowie for years. Then she and George retired to Leisure World, where they were active and attended services with the Jewish residents of Leisure World. But when our congregation moved out of Silver Spring and we were in rental facilities, she and George came to our shul in the Olney Theater. They attended almost every Shabbat, and sometimes Marilyn even read from the Torah. She and George came to Friday night dinners as well. And we even had an opportunity to share a simcha together just a couple of months ago. The Shabbat after Pesach was my granddaughter's baby naming that Shabbat, and Marilyn and George had an aliyah together to celebrate his birthday. Marilyn was always gracious and dignified. She always had a smile on her face as she asked about my family, and even more when talking about her ever-expanding family. She shared proudly about her twice-yearly trips to Israel to see the family, and would kvel with so much joy and pride as she talked about this bar mitzvah or that bris that she got to attend. Family was the center of her life, and it was a blessing that she got to travel to Israel this past March, that she got to celebrate Passover with Sharon and the family in New Jersey, and that she passed away with her daughter and family by her side. Marilyn was a vivacious and energetic woman. She was not one to stay at home. When her youngest son was in kindergarten, she went back to school, finished her college degree in education. She worked as a substitute public school teacher, but then saw an ad for an opening in a travel agency. She applied, got the job, and worked as a travel agent, rising to be the manager of that agency for 20 years. She also went on to get a master's degree from George Washington University and taught travel in their school for several years. Marilyn got to travel the world, take countless cruises, and visit all 7 continents. Nothing could keep her down. She was full of life and optimism. Even in the darkest moment, when in the span of 6 months, her first husband, her son Robert, and her mother passed away, she was able to pick herself up and move on. She always said that she's had a blessed life and that she's been so lucky. It was a privilege to have known Marilyn. Our shul was blessed by her presence. Her active involvement made our community stronger. In the Torah portion we read tomorrow, Korach, even though in Israel they read Korach last week, we read Korach tomorrow. Korach led a rebellion against Moses' leadership. In order to prove to all that Aaron was rightfully chosen as the religious leader of the people, God asked all the tribes to bring a wooden staff to the sanctuary and leave it overnight. In the morning, Aaron's staff had miraculously sprouted with flowers and almonds to prove that he is the chosen person to lead the Kohanim, the priestly family. Marilyn is descended from that Aaron. She was a Kohen. She left behind a legacy of blossoms, all of you, her extended family and friends. May her memory continue to flower in us, and may it continue to flourish for years to come. I want to share, before I conclude, the words of Rabbi Paul Kerbel, who was the rabbi of Neve Shalom in Bowie from 1985 to 1995, and could not be here today, but wanted these words to be shared. Dear family, he says, from the vantage point of 38 years in the rabbinate, I can say without a doubt that the years I served as a rabbi of Neve Shalom were among the best years of our lives. It is in Bowie that I learned how to become a rabbi. It was in Bowie that our children were born and we began our family. It was in Bowie that I met so many wonderful people. And at the top of the list was a woman named Marilyn Green. But she was not just a congregant, she was our travel agent. She became our friend, and most importantly, quietly and on the sidelines, she shared with me her wisdom and ideas. She was one of my go-to advisors. And while time and distance had not kept us as in touch over the last few years as I would have liked, I can truly say Marilyn was a most special person and that she will be deeply missed. She will be missed because of her morals and values. She will be missed because of her deep love for the Jewish tradition and Jewish observance. She will be missed because of her love for Neve Shalom and Sharei Tefillah. She will be missed because of her love for Israel and the Jewish people. And most importantly, she will be missed because of the beautiful family she and Chuck created and she and George expanded, a family that embodies her values and concerns and the deep love she had for all of you. The great Israeli writer and Nobel Prize winner Shmuel Yosef Agnon wrote an introduction to the Kaddish many years ago. I am reciting it from memory, but a portion of it goes like this. Because we, the Jewish people, are so small, when a member of the house of Israel dies, there is a tremendous loss in our kingdom. Each of us is irreplaceable. We mourn today, Rabbi Kerbel continues, our eyes are filled with tears because there is a tremendous loss in our kingdom. Marilyn Green Kessler is irreplaceable. I'm sorry that our travels to Israel and England prevent me from being with you today. I've been a part of so many life cycle moments in your families, happy and sad, and I wish I could be with you today to mourn and grieve with you and comfort you the best I can. The world is a better place because Marilyn lived. May her memory be a blessing to you, the people of Israel, and all of humanity. Tehi nishmata tzura b'tzur chayim. May Marilyn's soul be bound in the bond of eternal life. Amen. Jeff is going to share with us Psalm 23.
Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai Roi Lo Echsar, Binot Desha Yarbitzeni, Al Mei Menuchot Yanchileni. Nafshi Shovev Yancheni Ba'amag Le'tzedek Leman Shemo. Gam ki elak begetz al mavet lo yarara ki ata imadi. Shivtecha umishantecha hema yenachamuni. Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged tzorai dishanta b'shemen roshi kosi revaya ach tov v'chased yerdefuni kol yemei chayai v'shavti b'veit Adonai le'orach yamim.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Before we conclude, just a couple of announcements from here. We'll proceed to King David Cemetery in Falls Church, Virginia. After that, Shiva will begin back at Creekside and Leisure World. from 3 to 5 this afternoon, or the 3 is thereabouts. With 4:30, we'll have mincha, a brief service for the family to say Kaddish. Shiva will resume on Sunday from 10 to 5, also at Creekside with minyan at 4:30, and then Monday morning as well from 10 to 12. We rise now as Jeff leads us in the El Male.
El Male Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamtze Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, B'ma'alot Kedoshim Utorim, Kezora Rakia Mazhirim, Et Nishmat Imenu Moratenu Miriam Bat Shmuel HaKohen V'chaya, Shalcha L'olama, Gan Eden Tehei Menuchata, Ana Bal Rachamim, Hastire B'Sim, Utzror B'tzura Chayim Et Nishmata, Adonai Hu Nachalata, V'tanoach B'Shalom HaMishkava, V'nomar, Amen.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure, to the soul of Miriam Bat Shmuel HaKohen V'chaya, to the soul of Marilyn Kessler, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace. Amen.